Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tim Fullerton, and I am the fractional CMO here at Jackson, and also run my own digital agency, Fullerton Strategies. And I'll be the moderator today for this really interesting, fascinating conversation on how AI can enhance the property and casualty insurance area. So with that, we're going to dive right into bios, and then we'll get kicked off because we've got a lot of stuff to cover today. So first, I'm going to kick it over to Scott Cohen.
Hello, everyone. I am the founder CEO of Jackson. Jackson is your AI architect that will come up with the blueprints and then guide you through the whole process of building custom AI. We as a company have a lot of experience working in a number of verticals, from the Department of Defense to retail and consumer-based applications, financial services, and I'm very excited to dive deeper and deeper into the property and casualty space. As a team, we have decades of experience. Actually, I calculated the other day, it's almost over a century of experience, and that makes us dinosaurs in the space. But we love diving into really complex problems and helping people embrace AI.
Great. Thanks, Scott. Chris, you're up next.
Yeah, Chris Cormier. I'm one of the co-founders and currently the president and CTO of a company called LeadCloud. Our core offering is a data integration platform that acts as middleware that intelligently connects systems in real time. Our core business is P&C insurance, but we also connect to any industry where there's data that needs to go from A to B.
Great. Brian, you're next.
And hello, everyone. My name is Brian Ochiltree, and I am the other co-founder with Chris of LeadCloud. We sold that to a mid-level carrier called National General in 2018, worked with them for a couple of years. They then sold to Allstate, so I ended my career there at Allstate. So got a couple of years on my belt there to get that viewpoint, and left in December, and am now an advisor in the InsurTech area and a proud advisor of the Rockstar team at Jackson.
Great. Thanks, everybody. And also, for those of you who are watching, if you have questions for the panelists throughout the whole session, feel free to drop them in the comment section, and we will try our best to get to them. And with that, we're going to actually go to Scott first for the very first topic, which is really help us, Scott, walk through sort of all of the use cases for AI and how it can enhance the P&C world.
Sure, not just for P&C, but in general. I'm talking to a lot of people that are enamored by AI. It's getting a lot of hype. They've played around with ChatGPT, and I think have the wrong impression that AI is like ChatGPT, and I mean it's only like ChatGPT. ChatGPT is a question answerer. You can ask it a question, you get an answer. ChatGPT does go along, goes further into other applications. But if you look at what, say, Google AI has done as far as number of tasks that the AI can perform, it's north of 200 different things that it can do, from making predictions to some of these use cases that are in this spotlight here. In general, I like to say, if there's any rote manual tasks that a human is performing sub 1 minute, AI is a perfect application to replace or augment, enhance humans. So it really runs the gamut as to how you can leverage these AI tools. Generative AI has been making a lot of headlines lately. It's funny, a few years ago, I hid that term because I didn't think anyone would understand what it meant. But now it's all the rage. So it's very much a part of all that we do, but not the only piece of the puzzle. What we're finding, and I mentioned it in the elevator pitch on what Jackson does, Jackson helps architect complex model systems, which means it will leverage the large language models. It will pull on all the goodness that you can get from ChatGPT and GPT-4 and the like. But it's going to tie together a bunch of different pieces of the solution, a bunch of different models. You know, you're doing a lifetime value scoring system. A lot of that has to do with the natural language about the individuals, about what the product is that you're trying to sell, as well as a regression analysis on putting a score on each one of those heads. Same kind of thing if you're doing return on ad spend, trying to figure out the right individuals to put money behind. it's a combination of those types of models to arrive at that decision.
Great. So let's dive in a little bit more specifically to the insurance use cases, and I'd love to hear both from Chris and Brian as well about for folks that are budgets are constantly strained, right, and reduced, and everybody's looking for a competitive advantage. So what are some of the things that insurance carriers and providers could do using AI to basically enhance their business model?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to jump in there, and I'd love to start with the Gen AI topic and the ChatGPT topic, Scott, just because I think it's top of mind. I think that my viewpoint is probably similar to a lot of the business execs at the carriers, because I'm not an AI guy, I'm not a tech guy. And I do think OpenAI opened the eyes to the rest of the world beyond your little segment of folks that have done this for years, relative to the power of AI across a massive data set. The insurance industry has more data than most industries, so it should be a great candidate to leverage the power of AI. And I think Gen AI, large language models, on the surface seem like they would be hugely valuable because carriers have tons of data. They have three massive constituents. They've got their customers, which is their most important. They have so much data to fuel a large language model to make customer service better, like ChatGPT does for consumers who are searching. You then have their agent distribution group, which is in some cases tens of thousands of agents, both captive and independent. And they have tons of data to fuel a very knowledgeable large language model to improve the relationship with those guys. And then you got employees. I was an Allstate employee. There's 50,000 employees with massive amounts of support staff and data, from HR to legal to training to security. And I think on the surface, it seems like would be a great candidate. But we hear in the news that you can't connect your data to ChatGPT. It's out in the public domain. And even if there is a new plugin that keeps your data separate, there's a data leakage problem. And then we have hallucinations. We hear that ChatGPT can give an answer that's completely wrong and do it very confidently. So are those myths or reality? And is there ever a future where carriers will be able to safely use a Gen AI platform as one of many AI solutions across their organization? And does Jackson provide any help against those risks?
All right, I want to take that one, Chris. Sorry to keep taking the mic here. We'll go back to you in a second. So the large language models like GPT-4 and the like Claude and Gemini that's coming from Google, they're all pre-trained on the world's data. I like to say Common Crawl, which is the download of the web, Wikipedia, a whole bunch of books. And they have this general understanding of the world, but they're not domain specific. They're not company specific. If we're talking about things like hyper-personalization on the slide here, it's not going to get down to the individual level either. So how can companies embrace this is something that we've been working on for a number of years now. In fact, one of our larger projects at the Department of Defense is all about this, because they have to trust the systems that they're using, and they can't have things like hallucinations rear in if you're talking about, say, weapon systems. The way to handle this is by putting a knowledge graph in the middle here. And what I mean by a knowledge graph is a graph-based data repository of your company's information. It's on your infrastructure. It's separate from the cloud LLMs. It's not leaking data to the cloud LLMs because it's only using it as a reference. So it's what I call the guardrails in the equation, where you can get all the goodness of that pre-trained model from a GPT-4. You balance it with your own personalized knowledge graph, and you get the best of both worlds. And that's the kind of complex architecture that I was alluding to earlier, is it's not as easy as add a knowledge graph in with an LLM. How you design that, how you get the prompt engineering side of it to work well, and how do you keep updating that knowledge graph, and how does that knowledge graph get employed in a pipeline where you can look at relationships between knowledge and people and products, or whatever it is that you're trying to put links between, so you can make better predictions.
Awesome. Yeah. And Scott, one of the things that we've seen sort of a buzz in the industry about is embedded insurance, and the idea of bridging the gap between that chat GPT and then into maybe a rating system of some kind. You and I were talking earlier about the ability to sort of connect into those real-time APIs to provide insurance rates or other things directly to consumers through that chat GPT interface. Touch on that a little bit.
Yeah. So the best thing, in my opinion, that ChatGPT has done for the world is have a better user interface. It's your access to the AI. For us that have been in the space, it wasn't a crazy change to the underlying architecture, but an incredible UI that everyone quickly adopted. So that's, I think, one of the keys, and I might be drifting a little bit away from your question. One of the keys is to have it be that seamless in not just a human's day-to-day, but in the workflows that an organization's using, where it's called upon when it makes sense to call upon it. And the other thing that I like to advocate is that it's not always the best solution to a given problem. Sometimes you can get away with more classical machine learning. Sometimes it's just statistics and good old math, computer software, and so forth. So hope that touches on.
Yeah. I think adding those customizable off-ramps, if you will, right? So if you've gone through the natural language, it identifies what you're trying to do and says, hang on a second, I know that this is a point, then I need to exit the chat interface and go to a form, right? Go to that more traditional interface for whatever it is, whether it's claims or getting quotes or, even customer support with those carriers. And I think that's a neat thing that there may be some misconceptions about how easy you can do that, right? So am I in chat? Am I not in chat? How do I bridge those gaps? It seems like it's much easier than we think it is to have that initial chat interface say, oh, wait a minute, you want the claims department, let me send you over here. And then you're redirected to a different interface or a phone call even, to continue the process.
It's almost a segue to a topic I know Brian likes to chat about around federated learning. Mm-hmm. Instead of me keeping the mic, Brian, do you want to talk a little bit about how you think that can be impactful to carriers?
Sure. First of all, I have very little knowledge of what federated learning is. Remember, I'm the business guy, but the way that I understand it, it's really going to be a game changer in insurance, because in theory, federated learning and horizontal and vertical learning are machine learning methods that allow a user or to create an AI-based predictive model using decentralized data. And I think that's a game changer. So in other words, if I'm an owner of a carrier, I can build an LTV model, and I can use claims data and marketing data and customer support data and agent data, all from different silos without the cost and security risk of centralizing them, and yet get a model that leverages those data points. And where it gets exciting to me is the bigger use cases. So that use case is what I call intra-carrier. What about intra-enterprise, where you have Zurich that has all their intra-carrier data? They own Farmers and all of their inter-carrier data. Farmers owns Bristol and 21st Century. Man, in aggregate, at the enterprise level, the volume of data is insane. And in theory, if the assumption is the more data, the better the outcome, it is a game changer. It seems to be relatively new. I don't know a lot about the technical feasibilities and issues with the implementation, but I think it's going to be a game changer. I mean, decentralized data in general.
So I'm going to step in for just to be the person that knows the least about insurance here. So Brian, what you said, if you were to drill that down into a 30 seconds, what are all of these things? How will they give a competitive advantage to an insurance provider if they were to build something like this? Just the top lines of 1, 2, 3. What would they be getting?
Well, federated learning specifically, simply allowing them to leverage the immense data they have that no one else has, right? I mean, I think it's agreed now that the more data you have, the better the model will be. I think that applies to both traditionally created models and AI-based or machine learning-based predictive models, which is my next question for you, Scott. But if we all agree that that's the case, the more data, the better the model, and the better the model, that's your competitive advantage. So I think that's the biggest value prop. I would say macroscopically for AI in the carrier space would be allowing them to leverage the data that they have so much of.
Right.
And I think combining and somehow connecting that data with third-party data that's now available, right? There's so many data sets, whether it's telematics or a lot of the stuff that's on Google Cloud, things like that. The ability to combine in-house data that you're right, across the entire enterprise, combine that with intent data or risk data or any other data points that are out there, the ability to combine that into one big model and to focus on LTV or cost per policy or whatever the target is. I think that's super exciting.
Great point, Chris. And that leverages the value of Lead Cloud, right? So one thing that Lead Cloud does better than anyone else in the industry is connect their partners to their digital partners, the carriers to their digital partners at scale. And there's a lot of data that is outside of their walls that they own because they've paid for, whether it be through a Neustar or Jornaya or Axiom hosting some type of a model for them or churn data. And they have access to that data. They own that data. So with a decentralized platform, you could truly leverage that in theory. I don't know the practical applications of that, but coming back to another, I'm sorry, Scott, did you want to talk as the AI expert?
Before we lose the thread on more data is always better, I used to say more data, more better. It was a playoff of Honey Boo Boo, if you remember that show, where she always said more butter, more better. There's been a movement lately around small data. We had the big data movement like a decade ago, and then to train these massive models, you need a ton of data. Like I was saying, the pre-trained models are using the world's data. And federated learning and accessing all of the data across an organization is key. But the old adage of garbage in, garbage out comes into play. The giant amounts of data can help with the training of the models, but when it comes to pulling together a specific use case like we've been talking about, I think one of the keys, and I didn't mention this earlier in my complex architecture spiel, but is to insert a vector database in the middle or alongside a knowledge graph. A vector database is kind of relatively new to the scene. It's like the hottest thing in the database world. The key to it is the ability to do similarity search. So you have all this wide swath of data. What you want to do is narrow it down to the ones that are relevant for the given use case, and then make sure that is good data and accurate. And then you use that to make the predictions. So there's a little bit of whittling it down to the right data to be able to be more accurate.
Yeah, and Scott, I know one of the questions we've seen from carriers across the board is, okay, I need AI. I don't know what that means yet, but I know that I need it. But as far as I understand, it takes me 6, 12, 2 years, whatever the timeline is, to get that model in place. If a carrier walks in tomorrow and says, hey, I need to use AI in some way, I don't know what that means yet, how much data do they need to really get started?
And hold on, Scott. Let me add one more piece to that question, because this is the one I hear the most when I'm talking to my carrier clients is, okay, look, I'm hearing all this about how valuable AI-based or machine learning-based predictive models are. Through a lot of the topics on your first slide there, all have components of models, whether it's an LTV model or a churn model or a pricing model, which is the most important. We've been doing it forever. Building models has been a key component to the carrier industry for 50 years. They know that space really well. What's the difference between what they've done before, multi-level regression analysis, or however they did it, and an AI-based model? How are they different? And do you guys have any value there in implementing those models?
I have technical difficulties here.
Can you hear us, Scott?
One second.
Okay.
Carry on without me.
Okay. While we're waiting, I'm just going to put out there, we've got about 10 minutes to go here, and I see we've got a pretty good crowd on the line. So, this is a great opportunity to drop some questions in the comments if you've got any. We'd be happy to answer any and all. I know this is an exciting topic, but also a little bit confusing. So we want to be a resource to anybody on the call as well. And I can see Brian is chomping at the bit to say something. So
well, I can fill in some space. I mean, here are topics that I think are important, and I'm hearing all the time. One is the predictive model question, which we'll get a good answer to. But how are AI models different and or better than traditional models? Because carriers are experts at building models. Eager to hear the answer to that question. Also, document organization. I can't find the right word for it, but it's garnering value, automated value from digitized documents like PDFs at scale. It's a use case that's in action right now in the P&C space. I think it's one of the first soft soil points of entry for AI, because we are seeing it around the claims side. It's basically, how can AI add value to gathering and managing and organizing and getting value from a massive set of, in a lot of cases, unstructured data, and producing a data set that can then be pushed along the process. Are you back, Scott?
I'm back. Yeah, I missed the first part of your question, though.
The first one is just, how are AI predictive models different than traditional? Are they better? How are they different?
Yeah, it's the ability to get more granular. So some use cases, you know exactly what needle you're looking for in the haystack. Other times you have a giant haystack, you don't even know what the needle looks like. And so it helps with exploratory analysis. It helps with better predictions. But the first step in any engagement is researching exactly what it is that will solve the business problem. Forget about all the tech jargon and hoopla that goes into that. What is the actual business you need? And this is one, I'm a little bit off the question, but one thing I like to go on the soapbox on is to properly implement AI takes a lot of collaboration between the business unit that's requesting it and the data science team that's building it, and making sure that they're in alignment. And then you get good results, whether you're using the newest whiz-bang AI or statistical models. The progression of using deep learning can give you the precision that I was just alluding to. But one of the key advantages is that you don't have to come up with all the different rules to make those determinations. I mean, historically, people have painstakingly created lots of interconnected rules. And when one changes, it can break the whole system. The machine learning models are able to shift on the fly, if you will, and figure out the features to look for, the nuggets of information that will make better predictions, and do that without all that heavy lifting around not just rules, but coding in the capability to make these decisions.
So I want to jump in here just for a quick second, because Scott, you're hitting on something that I think also shows the value of Jackson, is that in the AI models and AI projects in general, there are several studies out there that show somewhere between 70 and 85% of all AI projects fail. Can you talk a little bit about that and how Jackson's focused on getting that number down dramatically?
Yeah, sure. So we've touched on some of these already. I think that the collaboration issue is a big piece of it. We often work with companies where the business unit had made a request. It was via email, maybe a call or two, maybe an internal chat, but they passed it off to data science, waited a couple months, and then got the results back, and it missed the mark. That's a huge part of failure. The data itself, I was mentioning, you have mounds and mounds of data, but good data is better data. So you want to make sure you call that out, and oftentimes that's overlooked. Unrealistic timelines also can derail productivity of the data science team. One thing I wanted to mention earlier is data science really is science. It's exploratory. You have to test hypotheses. I mentioned that the benefit of AI is that you don't have to come up with all the rules, but you still need someone at the helm that understands how to use it and how to tie it to that business requirement. The design of the system, I think, is also often overlooked. The architecture of how to pull these things together are oftentimes out of the tops of the data scientist head. The other issue, which is related to that, is PhDs kind of rule the day when it comes to data science land. But with Jackson, you don't have to be a PhD to be effective, and you don't have to know what the right architecture is, because Jackson's going to guide you toward that right architecture. Another benefit of that is that when the PhD that knew how to pull it together leaves, all that knowledge leaves with them. With Jackson, you're storing up the usage patterns of what works and when. So you have this AI architect at your disposal to make sure that not only design is right, but the plan is stuck to as the models are being built, all the model systems are being built. So the non-PhDs can have this constant assistant that's looking over their shoulder to make sure that they're hitting the constraints, that they're going to have a good result at the other side. Last thing I'll say is that iteration is often a too big of a challenge because of the custom pipelines that are created to process data. Once you get into it, it's hard to shift gears. So the notion of rapid prototyping, which Jackson likes to harp on, is another key, is to quickly fail and find the right combination of data and model to have a successful AI app on the other side.
Great. Well, we have about 4.5 minutes to go. And I think one of the big questions I'm sure people have is, okay, like this all sounds great. This is exciting. Like, you know, obviously this can help to really target the right customers, crunch the right data, doing all these things. Where do I start? Like what is the best way? And, you know, obviously this is right in Jackson's wheelhouse and LeadCloud as a partner as well. Like, what should they do to be able to do, you know, to start looking into this?
Sure. I was going to point it at LeadCloud as a good starting point. Brian, it seems like you want to talk.
I would like to add some color to that question. I was muted. I apologize. So Scott, it sounds like you have a pretty cool platform that our PhDs and our more junior folks can use to leverage. Do you guys do services as well? If I have no PhDs, can you help me build the systems and leave it? Where are you in that spectrum? So just
absolutely. So we have been doing this for a while. I mentioned that earlier. We have great teams of data scientists that can be employed. So if your organization doesn't have a large data science team and wants the help, maybe it's just kicking off the first few models. The product will be handed over to you so your team can run with it, but we are certainly here to help as long and as much as needed. Thank you for that question. But back to the Tim's question, Chris, I would point it back to you as a great starting point. With LeadCloud in the mix, you have access and the ability to pull together all that gold, all those nuggets of data that can be used to feed into Jackson to make a prediction. And I think that's a great starting point, is first find a use case that has the highest ROI. And we talk a lot about programmatic marketing and lifetime value scoring and what's the right ICP and so forth. I think that's where to start, is find one of those that will have real impact to the bottom line, that the higher ups will not only appreciate that we're using AI, but they can see the results of it. And then, Chris, do you want to add in?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so obviously, especially in the P&C space, markets are tough right now. People are looking for when this magical rebound is going to happen. Consumer acquisition is an easy target here, right? When you look at that real-time data feed across the entire funnel of marketing and trying to find target LTV, target cost per acquisition, whatever it is that you're looking for, with that real-time feed going into a Jackson AI, going into those models, looking at the results and figuring out where are the pockets that work, where are the pockets that don't. And that's an easy entry point, right? Then you're dabbling in AI, you're building models. Jackson's getting more familiar with your business, with your targets, things like that. That can then feed into other applications, right? Adding in a ChatGPT to your site, adding in something tying into the rating, but when you have that entry point with data, and like Brian and I were saying earlier, the entry point with third-party data, whether it's through LexisNexis or it's telematics data, it's whatever it is, when you have that entry point feeding into the models at the top, it's then easy to add in more stuff, further deep into the system.
Great. Well, everybody, I think we have gotten to the 30-minute mark here. I just want to thank our panelists for joining us today and talking us through a really interesting and fascinating aspect of the insurance world. If you have further questions for us, feel free to follow us here on the LinkedIn channel or check us out at jackson.ai or send us a note at info@jackson.ai. We are here to help answer any question, small or big, so feel free to reach out. Otherwise, thank you again for participating, and we look forward to hosting another one in the near future. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thanks everyone. Take care.
Thanks, guys. See ya.